What if I told you that right now, as you listen to this story, there's an angel walking among us in human form? What if the stranger who helped you yesterday, the doctor who saved your life, or the friend who appeared at exactly the right moment, wasn't who they seemed to be? Tonight, we're diving deep into one of the most incredible true stories ever recorded, the complete account of Archangel Raphael, heaven's master healer who once spent months living as a human being. But here's what will shock you. This story raises questions that theologians still debate today, questions that might change everything you think you know about divine intervention. Before we begin this journey together, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. You're about to hear details about this story that most people never discover. And I want to know, where are you listening from tonight? Drop your location in the comments. I read every single one. Picture this. Before time existed, before the first star blazed to life, there was a moment of perfect silence. But this wasn't empty silence. It was pregnant with infinite possibility. In this cosmic pause, 7 beings were conceived in the mind of God. 7 angels who would stand closer to the throne than any others, each with a unique purpose that would shape human history. But here's where it gets controversial. Why did God create angels at all? Think about it. An all-powerful being who can do anything. Why would he need helpers? Some scholars argue that angels prove God chose relationship over isolation, love over power. Others suggest something more mysterious, that angels fulfill purposes we don't yet understand. Among these 7 mighty beings, one stood apart. Not because he was the strongest, that was Michael. Not because he carried the most important messages, that was Gabriel. This angel was different because he was created with something unique, the ability to heal, not just bodies, but souls, situations, and even the fabric of reality itself. His name was Raphael, which means God heals. But here's what's fascinating. In ancient Hebrew, names weren't just labels. They were prophecies, declarations of destiny, containers of power. When God spoke the never hear. Among the younger angels, one became overwhelmed by the raw creative power present at the birth of a new star. The intensity of pure divine energy left this angel stunned, dimmed, unable to sing the praises that flowed naturally from angelic beings. What happened next establishes the pattern for all of Raphael's future healings. He didn't just restore what was lost. He transformed the experience of wounding into something greater than what existed before. The young angel's temporary dimming became the foundation for an even brighter radiance, a deeper capacity for wonder and worship. This raises a disturbing question. Is suffering sometimes necessary for growth? Did God design pain as a pathway to greater wholeness? Or is suffering an intrusion that healing angels like Raphael work to overcome? For millennia, Raphael watched over creation from his position before God's throne. He witnessed the formation of galaxies, the birth of worlds, the emergence of life in countless forms. But his attention kept returning to one small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star. Earth was different. Unlike other worlds that remained largely static, this planet pulsed with constant change. Seasons cycled, weather patterns shifted, life forms evolved and adapted. But most intriguingly, this world was being prepared for creatures unlike any others in creation, beings who would possess free will, the ability to choose between good and evil. From his heavenly vantage point, Raphael could see what was coming. These new creatures would be magnificent, made in God's own image, capable of love, creativity, and spiritual growth. But they would also be vulnerable in ways that angels were not. They would know sickness, injury, heartbreak, and death. They would need healing in dimensions angels had never experienced. As Earth neared completion, Raphael felt something stirring within his eternal being. A calling, a purpose that reached across the cosmic distances toward this small world and its future inhabitants. He sensed that his greatest work lay not in the perfection of heaven, but in the struggles and sufferings of earth. But here's what should make us all pause and wonder. If an angel whose very essence is healing felt drawn to our world, watch for. The answer might change how you see every stranger you meet. Have you ever wondered what happens when you pray? I mean, really wondered. Where do your words go? Who hears them? And what determines whether they receive an answer? Tonight, we're about to witness something that will challenge everything you think you know about prayer. We're going to see what happened when two desperate cries for help, spoken by people who had never met, somehow reached heaven at exactly the same moment and triggered a divine intervention that would change 3 lives forever. But first, let me hear from you. What's the most desperate prayer you've ever prayed? Drop it in the comments if you're comfortable sharing. Because what you're about to hear might give you hope about prayers you thought went unanswered. In the bustling city of Nineveh, ancient capital of the Assyrian Empire, lived a man named Tobit. Once wealthy and respected in his homeland of Israel, he now lived as a refugee, torn from everything he loved when the Assyrian army conquered his nation and dragged thousands into exile. But here's what made Tobit extraordinary. While other exiles adapted to their new culture, married into Assyrian families, and slowly forgot their Hebrew heritage, Tobit refused to bend. Day after day, year after year, he maintained his faith, helped the poor, and performed acts of mercy that often put him in danger. The most dangerous thing he did? Burying the dead bodies of his fellow Israelites. The Assyrians left Hebrew corpses unburied as a form of humiliation. But Tobit, at great personal risk, would retrieve these bodies and give them proper burial according to Jewish law. Think about this. What kind of person risks everything to honor the dead? What does this tell us about the power of conviction? And here's a controversial question. Was Tobit's obsession with burial rites admirable faithfulness or dangerous fanaticism? Now, 700 miles away in the Persian city of Ecbatana, another story of faith and suffering was unfolding. Sarah, daughter of Raguel, possessed beauty that could stop traffic and a heart pure enough to make angels weep. She should have been the happiest young woman in her community. Instead, she was terrified to leave her house. Here's why. Have permission to attack the righteous to accomplish some greater purpose. Still others claim that this story is symbolic rather than literal. But what if it's exactly what it appears to be? A good person being tormented by evil forces, crying out to heaven for help that seems slow in coming. How does that challenge our understanding of divine justice? On the same night, and this is crucial to our story, both Tobit and Sarah reached their breaking point. Tobit, now blind from a freak accident involving bird droppings that fell into his eyes while he slept, and yes, that's really what the ancient text says, could no longer work to support his family. His wife had begun earning money by weaving, and when she came home with payment that seemed too generous, Tobit accused her of stealing. The argument that followed was devastating. Feeling useless, blind, and convinced he had become a burden to his family, Tobit walked into his courtyard and prayed what he thought would be his final prayer. "Take my life, Lord. Let me die and escape this misery." That exact same night, 700 miles away, Sarah had endured another day of whispers and pointing fingers. Children ran from her in the streets. Mothers warned their sons to avoid her. The community she had grown up in now treated her like a plague carrier. Unable to bear the isolation any longer, Sarah climbed to her father's roof and prepared to hang herself. But before she could complete the act, she fell to her knees and cried out, "Lord, either let me die or heal me of this curse. I cannot bear this reproach any longer." Now here's where the story becomes absolutely extraordinary. The ancient text tells us that both prayers reached heaven at precisely the same moment, and something incredible happened. God called Raphael. Picture this scene. In the throne room of heaven, surrounded by the worship of countless angels, the sovereign of the universe turns to his master healer and gives him an assignment unlike any he had ever received. He wouldn't remain in heaven this time. He wouldn't appear in glory and power. Instead, he would disguise himself as a human being and walk among mortals for months. His mission was unprecedented. Heal the blind man, destroy the demon, unite two faithful families, and travel with him without suspicion. And God had the perfect candidate in mind, Tobias, Tobias' faithful son, who was about to embark on the journey of his lifetime. Coming up next, we'll meet this extraordinary young man and witness how a father's final request launched the most unusual mentorship in human history. But I have to ask you, if an angel appeared at your door disguised as a human guide, what clues would give away his true identity? Share your thoughts below and hit that like button if you're starting to see this familiar story in a whole new light. The question that will keep you wondering: what if your greatest crisis is actually God setting up your greatest miracle? What would you do if you lost everything? Your sight, your income, your independence, even your sense of purpose? Most people would become bitter, angry, maybe even lose their faith entirely. But what you're about to discover about a blind man named Tobit will challenge every assumption you have about how to respond to overwhelming loss. But first, I want to know, have you ever been in a situation where everyone around you thought you should give up, but something inside you refused to quit? Tell me about it in the comments, because Tobit's story might give you the courage you didn't know you needed. The accident that stole Tobit's sight was so bizarre that some people didn't believe it actually happened. Picture this. After another dangerous night of burying executed Hebrew prisoners, Tobit came home exhausted. The physical toll of digging graves in rocky soil, combined with the emotional weight of honoring the dead, had drained him completely. He collapsed on his bed without bothering to cover his face, something he usually did to protect himself from the sparrows that nested in the courtyard walls above. While he slept, bird droppings fell directly into his eyes. The acidic waste immediately began burning his corneas, but Tobit was so exhausted that he didn't wake until the damage was irreversible. Now, let's be honest, that's not exactly the kind of dramatic blindness we expect in epic stories. No battle with giants, no divine punishment for great sin, no heroic sacrifice. Just closer to despair. His wife Anna, once content to manage their household while Tobit earned their living, now became the primary breadwinner. She took work weaving cloth for wealthy Assyrian families, work that kept her away from home for long hours and brought in barely enough money to buy food. But here's where Tobit's character reveals itself most clearly. Instead of being grateful for his wife's sacrifice, he became suspicious and controlling. When Anna brought home a young goat in addition to her usual payment, Tobit immediately accused her of stealing it. "Where did this goat come from?" he demanded. "Return it to its owners immediately. We cannot eat stolen food." Anna's response was devastating. "It was given to me as a bonus for my good work, but you're so righteous you can't even trust your own wife. Where has all your charity gotten you? You're blind, poor, and suspicious of everyone who tries to help you." Think about this moment. Here's a woman who has lost her comfortable life, watched her husband suffer, and taken on work she never expected to do, all while maintaining her faith and dignity. And her husband responds with suspicion instead of gratitude. Was Tobit being righteously careful about maintaining integrity, or was he allowing his pain to make him cruel to those who loved him most? This is the kind of moral complexity that makes this story so compelling and so challenging. That night, after their argument, Tobit sat alone in his courtyard and confronted the reality of his situation. He couldn't work, he couldn't provide for his family, he couldn't even trust his own wife. The man who had spent his life helping others now felt like a burden to everyone around him. But here's what happened next that reveals the extraordinary nature of Tobit's faith. Instead of cursing God or abandoning his beliefs, he prayed with brutal honesty. God, you are righteous, and all your ways are just. You deal with us according to your will. Now remember me and look upon me. Do not punish me for my sins or my father's sins. Take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live. This prayer raises profound questions about faith and suffering. Was Tobit demonstrating trust by accepting his fate, or was he giving up on God's ability to change his circumstances?
He called his son Tobias to his side and gave him instructions that would change both their lives forever. My son, I have left 10 talents of silver with Gabael in Rages. Now I'm old and may die soon. Find someone trustworthy to travel with you and recover this money. It's your inheritance. Think about what Tobit was asking. He was sending his beloved son on a journey of hundreds of miles through territory controlled by bandits and wild animals. He was trusting a young man who had never traveled beyond their neighborhood to negotiate with a man they hadn't seen in years. He was risking the only thing he had left, his son, on the possibility of recovering money that might not even exist anymore. Why would a loving father make such a request? Was this faith or desperation? Wisdom or folly? Here's what I think. Tobit understood something profound about how God works. He knew that sitting at home, blind and bitter, would never lead to breakthrough. He sensed that sometimes God's solutions require us to take action, even when we can't see the outcome. He believed that faithful obedience in the darkness often precedes miraculous intervention in the light. Young Tobias, who had watched his father suffer with quiet dignity, agreed to make the journey. But he had one practical concern. Father, I don't know the way to Rages, and I've never traveled alone. How will I find this man Gabael? How will I prove I'm your son? Tobit's answer was simple. Find someone who knows the roads to Media. God will send a good angel to travel with you. He had no idea how literally that prayer was about to be answered. Coming up next, we'll meet the mysterious stranger who knocked on their door the very next morning. A man who seemed to know exactly where they needed to go and exactly what they needed to do. But here's what will shock you. The signs that he wasn't entirely human were there from the very beginning. But first, hit that like button if you're amazed by Tobit's faith in the face of impossible circumstances. And tell me, what's the biggest risk you've ever taken because you believed God was leading you? Your story might encourage someone who's facing their own impossible decision right now. Share your honest thoughts in the comments, because Sarah's story will make you reconsider everything. 700 miles from Nineveh, in the Persian city of Ecbatana, Sarah, daughter of Raguel, had become the most feared woman in her community. Not because she was cruel or violent, but because she was cursed, and everyone knew it. Her beauty was legendary. Poets composed verses about her dark eyes and gentle smile. Artists begged for the chance to capture her grace in paint or stone. Young men from wealthy families competed for her attention, each convinced he would be the one to win her heart. But Sarah's beauty had become her curse, because it had attracted the attention of something that shouldn't exist in a rational world. A demon named Asmodeus. Now, let's pause here because this raises questions that make many people uncomfortable. In our scientific age, We like explanations that fit neatly into categories we understand. Mental illness, coincidence, exaggeration, superstition. These are comfortable ways to explain away stories like Sarah's. But what if some experiences can't be reduced to psychology or probability? What if there really are malevolent spiritual beings that can affect our physical world? What if Sarah's story is exactly what it appears to be? A good person being tormented by genuine evil. The pattern began with her first marriage. Manasseh was his name, a kind young man from a respected family, deeply in love with Sarah and eager to begin their life together. The wedding was beautiful, the celebration joyful, the families united in happiness for the young couple's future. But when the guests departed and the newlyweds retired to their chamber, something invaded their room. Not something you could see clearly or fight with physical weapons. A presence of malevolence so intense that it seemed to suck the light from the oil lamps and the warmth from the air itself. Manasseh died before he could cry out. No wound, no poison, no disease. Just life suddenly absent from a body that had been vibrant moments before. Sarah found herself alone with a corpse, screaming questions that had no answers. The family called it a tragic coincidence. The community whispered about weak hearts and wedding night nerves. Sarah began to believe that somehow, impossibly, it was her fault. Became accusations. Some said Sarah was a black widow, somehow killing her husbands through unknown means. Others claimed she was possessed, that marrying her was tantamount to suicide. The most charitable assumed she was cursed, probably because of some sin committed by her or her ancestors. Sarah's parents, Raguel and Edna, watched their daughter transform from a joyful young woman into a living ghost. She stopped singing the songs that had once filled their house with music. She avoided mirrors because she couldn't bear to see the beauty that had attracted such devastating attention. She spent hours in prayer, sometimes weeping, sometimes angry, always desperate for answers that never came. The isolation was perhaps worse than the deaths themselves. Former friends crossed the street to avoid her. Mothers pulled their sons away when she appeared in the marketplace. Children whispered stories about the cursed woman who killed men with her touch. Sarah became a living legend, feared, pitied, but never truly understood. But here's what makes Sarah's story so remarkable. She never gave up her faith. Despite overwhelming evidence that God had abandoned her, despite the deaths of 7 innocent men, despite becoming an outcast in her own community, she continued to pray. Her prayers weren't pretty or polite. They were raw, desperate, sometimes angry demands for justice or relief or explanation. But they were prayers nonetheless. Acknowledgements that somewhere beyond her suffering, there was still a God who might listen, who might care, who might eventually act. The night everything changed, Sarah had reached her absolute limit. Another day of pointed stares and whispered conversations. Another evening of her parents' worried glances and careful kindness. Another night of lying awake, wondering if she would ever know normal human connection again. She climbed to the roof of her father's house, rope in hand, ready to end the curse by ending her life. But even in that moment of ultimate despair, she couldn't act without first speaking to the God who seemed to have forgotten her. "Blessed are you, O Lord my God," she prayed through tears. "Blessed is your holy name forever. May all your works praise you forever. And now, Lord, I have turned..." Manifest in her situation. What she couldn't know was that at that exact moment, hundreds of miles away, a blind man named Tobit was praying his own desperate prayer. What she couldn't see was that both their cries were about to collide in heaven and trigger an intervention that would change everything. But here's the question that should keep you awake tonight. If you were in Sarah's situation, would you have maintained faith for 7 tragedies? Would you have continued praying to a God who seemed absent, or would you have concluded that some people are just marked for suffering? Coming up next, we'll witness the moment when heaven's master healer receives his most complex assignment yet: heal the blind man, destroy the demon, and somehow bring these two broken families together. But the method God chooses will shock you with its simplicity and its genius. Hit that subscribe button if you're starting to understand that some battles can only be won through divine intervention. And tell me in the comments, have you ever felt like Sarah, wondering if God sees your suffering? Because what happens next will give you hope you didn't know you needed. The question that changes everything: what if your greatest torment is actually preparing you for your greatest victory? Have you ever met someone who seemed to know things they shouldn't know? Someone whose presence brought peace you couldn't explain, whose advice was exactly what you needed to hear, whose timing was too perfect to be coincidence? What you're about to discover will make you look at every helpful stranger differently, because sometimes the person offering assistance isn't who they appear to be. Sometimes heaven sends help in the most unexpected disguise. But first, let me ask you something that might change how you see the world. If angels walk among us in human form, how would we recognize them? What signs should we watch for? Keep that question in mind as we meet the most mysterious character in our story. The morning after Tobit's desperate prayer, young Tobias began his search for a travel companion. His father's instructions were clear: find someone trustworthy who knows the roads to Media, someone who can guide you safely to Regez and back. In a city like Nineveh, full of strangers and merchants from distant lands, this should have been a simple task, but as Tobias, a traveler in simple but quality clothing, it was something else, something harder to define. An aura of confidence without arrogance, strength without threat, wisdom without condescension. Their eyes met across the crowded square, and the stranger smiled. Not the calculating smile of a merchant sizing up a customer, or the desperate grin of someone eager to please, but the warm recognition of someone greeting an old friend. "Peace be with you, brother," the stranger called out, using the traditional Hebrew greeting that immediately identified him as a fellow Israelite. "And with you," Tobias replied, walking toward him with growing curiosity. "I'm looking for someone who knows the road to Media. My father needs me to travel to Regez on urgent business." The stranger's response should have been the first clue that something extraordinary was happening. "I know the way well. I've traveled to Regez many times and have stayed with your kinsman, Gabael. I know exactly where he lives and how to find him safely." Think about this for a moment. In a city of hundreds of thousands of people, Tobias randomly encounters someone who not only knows the distant city he needs to reach, but personally knows the specific man he's looking for. What are the odds of such a coincidence? But Tobias, young and trusting, felt only relief and growing excitement. "Would you be willing to travel with me? My father will pay you well for your services." "I would be honored to accompany you," the stranger replied. "My name is Azariah, son of the great Ananias. I am your kinsman." Again, pause and consider. In a story where names carry prophetic significance, what does Azariah mean? In Hebrew, it means Yahweh has helped, or God is my helper. The man claiming to be Tobias's guide literally carried a name that declared divine assistance. Was this coincidence, or was something deeper at work? But the most telling moment came when Tobias brought this stranger home to meet his father. Remember, Tobit was blind. He couldn't see Azariah's appearance, couldn't be swayed by a trustworthy face or confident bearing.
Tobit hear in Azariah's voice that convinced him so quickly? Was it tone, vocabulary, accent, or something more mysterious? Then came the moment that should have revealed everything. Tobit asked about Azariah's wages for the journey. "I will pay you a drachma a day, plus expenses, and you will receive the same as my son," Tobit offered. Azariah's response was telling. "I will go with him, do not worry. We will leave in good health and return to you safely, for the way is safe." Notice what he didn't say. He didn't negotiate the payment, didn't ask the money in advance, didn't even acknowledge the financial arrangement. For someone supposedly working as a professional guide, this lack of interest in compensation should have been suspicious. But the most revealing moment came when Tobit said, "Bless you, my brother. May you have a safe journey." Azariah replied, "May the Lord of heaven prosper your journey, and may his angel accompany you." Think about this carefully. A man asking for God's angel to accompany a journey he was personally guiding. Was this the humble prayer of a devout believer, or was it something more? The subtle hint of someone who knew exactly which angel would be accompanying them. As the two young men prepared for their departure, gathering supplies and making final arrangements, Anna couldn't shake her uneasiness. "Why have you sent our child away?" she demanded of her husband. "Isn't he the staff of our hand, going in and out before us? Don't heap money upon money. Let it be a ransom for our child. What the Lord has given us to live on is enough for us." But Tobit's confidence in their mysterious guide was unshakable. "Do not worry, my sister. He will depart safely and return to us safely, and you will see him with your own eyes on the day when he returns to you in good health. Don't worry about them. A good angel will accompany him, his journey will prosper, and he will return unharmed." The irony is breathtaking. Tobit was praying for angelic protection for a journey that would be guided by an angel in human disguise. He was asking heaven to send help that was already standing in his courtyard. But perhaps the most extraordinary detail is one that most people miss. Throughout this entire encounter, different from any ordinary trip. What none of them could know was that they were walking directly into the path of a miracle. Their destination wasn't just Reg's, it was a divine appointment that had been orchestrated from heaven itself. Coming up next, we'll witness the moment when a simple fishing trip becomes a supernatural encounter with healing power that doctors still can't explain. But here's what will shock you. The miracle wasn't random. It was precisely timed, carefully planned, and absolutely essential for what was coming. Hit that like button if you're starting to see how God orchestrates circumstances we think are coincidences. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had a stranger appear in your life at exactly the right moment? You might have encountered more than you realized. The question that will change your perspective. What if the help you're praying for is already walking toward you, disguised as something ordinary? What if I told you that the solution to every problem you're facing right now might be hidden in something you'd normally throw away? What if the breakthrough you've been praying for is disguised as something so ordinary, so unexpected, that you might miss it entirely? The miracle you're about to witness involves a fish. Not a majestic whale or exotic sea creature, but an ordinary fish that most people would use for dinner and forget. But in the hands of heaven, ordinary things become extraordinary solutions. Before we dive in, I need to know, what's the most unusual way God has ever answered your prayers? Share it in the comments, because Sarah and Tobias are about to discover that divine solutions rarely look like what we expect. 3 days into their journey, Tobias and Azariah reached the Tigris River. The ancient road system required travelers to follow water sources, both for drinking water and because rivers provided the safest, most reliable routes through otherwise dangerous territory.
They had been walking since dawn, and the afternoon sun was beginning to take its toll. Azariah suggested they rest by the riverbank and refresh themselves before continuing. To Tobias, this seemed like practical wisdom from an experienced traveler. He had no idea he was about to participate in a carefully orchestrated
Shallow water. Something extraordinary happened. A fish, massive, larger than any he had ever seen, suddenly lunged out of the water directly at him. This wasn't the normal behavior of river fish, which typically avoid human contact. This creature seemed to be attacking, its huge mouth open, its intentions clearly aggressive. Tobias stumbled backward, crying out in alarm, "Sir, this fish is trying to devour me." But Azariah's response was not what you'd expect from a normal travel guide. Instead of helping Tobias escape or showing concern for his safety, Azariah called out calmly, "Catch the fish! Don't let it get away." Think about this moment. A young man is being attacked by what appears to be a dangerous aquatic predator, and his guide's advice is to grab it? What kind of person responds to danger with such unusual instructions? What did Azariah know that Tobias couldn't see? Somehow, and Tobias would never be able to explain exactly how, he managed to grab the thrashing fish and drag it onto the riverbank. The creature was enormous, easily weighing as much as a small sheep, with scales that seemed to shimmer with unusual colors in the afternoon sunlight. "Well done," Azariah said, examining the fish with satisfaction. "Now, this is very important. You must cut this fish open and save the heart, liver, and gallbladder. Keep them with you at all times." Tobias stared at his guide in confusion. "Why would I want to keep fish organs? And how do you know so much about preparing fish anyway?" Azariah's answer should have been another clue to his true identity. The heart and liver are useful for driving away demons when they trouble anyone, and the gall is good for anointing the eyes when white films disfigure them. It will cure the blindness. Let's pause here because this raises fascinating questions. How did a travel guide acquire medical knowledge about curing blindness? How did he know about methods for confronting demonic activity? In that ancient world, such knowledge was typically possessed only by priests, physicians, or those with supernatural insight. But Tobias, trusting and eager to learn, followed the instructions carefully. He cleaned the fish, carefully preserved the specified order, delivering the precise tools needed for the healings that lay ahead. The heart and liver would provide the means to destroy the demon tormenting Sarah. The gall would restore sight to his father's eyes. But here's what's truly extraordinary. The fish had been waiting in that exact spot in the river for precisely the right moment. Not just any day, not just any traveler, but specifically for Tobias, guided by Raphael, at the exact time when both tools would be needed. This raises profound questions about how God works in our world. Do divine solutions sometimes wait patiently in ordinary places until we're ready to receive them? Are miracles hidden in plain sight, disguised as natural events that only look supernatural when we understand their perfect timing? The next morning, as they prepared to continue their journey, Tobias carefully checked his pouches to make sure the fish organs were secure. He had no idea he was carrying the weapons needed to win 2 separate battles against forces that had seemed undefeatable. "How much further to Ecbatana?" he asked as they set out. "We should arrive by evening," Azariah replied. "And when we do, I have something important to tell you about your kinsman Raguel and his daughter Sarah." Tobias felt a strange flutter in his chest at the mention of this unknown girl. Why would his guide bring up Raguel's daughter specifically? What was he supposed to know about her? "She's very beautiful," Azariah continued, "and she comes from a good family. In fact, she would make an excellent wife for a young man like yourself." "Marriage?"
Tobias laughed nervously. I'm not ready for marriage. Besides, I don't even know this girl. Azariah's smile held secrets Tobias couldn't fathom. Trust me, my young friend. Some meetings are arranged by heaven itself. And sometimes the person you're meant to spend your life with is waiting at the end of a journey you never expected to take. As they walked toward Ecbatana that day, Tobias found himself thinking about marriage for the first time in his life. Something about his guide's confidence, his certainty that this unknown Sarah would be perfect for him, was strangely compelling. He had no idea it might actually be an extraordinary answer to prayer. The question that will keep you wondering, what if the breakthrough you need is already in your possession, waiting for the right moment to be revealed? Warning, what you're about to hear is not your typical love story. This is an account of spiritual warfare, life and death stakes, and a wedding night that would either end in triumph or tragedy. If you've ever wondered whether love is worth risking everything for, Sarah and Tobias are about to show you the answer. But first, I need to know, do you believe that true love is worth fighting for, even when the odds seem impossible? Share your thoughts in the comments, because what these two young people face together will challenge everything you think you know about courage, faith, and the power of love guided by divine wisdom. As the sun began to set, Tobias and Azariah approached the walls of Ecbatana. The Persian city was smaller than Nineveh, but prosperous, with well-maintained streets and comfortable homes that spoke of a community that had adapted successfully to life in exile. Azariah guided them directly to a house in one of the better neighborhoods. A two-story dwelling with a courtyard garden and the kind of solid construction that indicated its owner had done well for himself in this foreign land. This is the home of Raguel, your father's kinsman, Azariah announced. He and his wife Edna are good people who have maintained their faith despite their circumstances. And their daughter Sarah. He paused, and Tobias noticed something in his guide's expression that he couldn't quite identify. Sympathy? Concern? Or perhaps knowledge of something he wasn't ready to share. What about their daughter? Tobias pressed. You'll understand soon enough, Azariah replied cryptically. But remember what I told you about the fish organs. Keep them close tonight, and be prepared to use them exactly as I instruct you. Raguel himself answered their knock, and his face immediately lit up with recognition when he saw Tobias. You have the look of your father about you, young man. You must be Tobit's son. The welcome was warm and genuine, but as the evening progressed, Tobias began to notice undercurrents of attraction that sometimes sparks between two souls who are meant to find each other. But Tobias also noticed what others saw when they looked at Sarah. The shadow of fear that seemed to follow her, the way conversation grew quieter when she appeared, the careful distance that even her loving parents maintained, as if proximity to their daughter carried some invisible danger. That night, after the evening meal, Azariah pulled Tobias aside for a private conversation that would change the young man's life forever. You're attracted to Sarah, he said. It wasn't a question. Tobias felt heat rise in his cheeks. She's beautiful and kind, but there's something about her that makes people afraid. What aren't you telling me? Azariah's answer was direct and terrifying. Sarah has been married 7 times. Each husband died on their wedding night, killed by a demon named Asmodeus, who has claimed her for himself. If you marry her, you will face the same fate, unless you're prepared to fight for her. The words hit Tobias like a physical blow. 7 dead husbands, a demon, wedding night murders. Everything about Sarah's sadness, her parents' fear, the community's reaction, suddenly made horrible sense. Then why are you suggesting I marry her? Tobias demanded. Are you trying to get me killed? I'm trying to save her, Azariah replied calmly. And I believe you're the one chosen to do it. But it will require courage you don't know you possess, and faith in weapons you don't understand. He reached for the pouches containing the fish organs. These are not just medical supplies, Tobias. The heart and liver, when burned, produce smoke that demons cannot endure. But the ritual must be performed correctly, with prayer and absolute faith, or it will fail. Tobias stared at the small pouches that suddenly seemed to carry the weight of life and death. And if it doesn't work? If I end up like the others? Then you will have died trying to free an innocent woman from torment she doesn't deserve, Azariah said quietly. But I don't believe you will fail. You have something the others lacked. What's that? Divine guidance, and a heart pure enough to love her despite the danger. The next day, Tobias made his decision. Despite this young man doesn't know what he's risking. But when she looked into Tobias's eyes and saw not just attraction but genuine love, when she heard him say, "I would rather die trying to save you than live knowing I abandoned you to this curse," something in her heart began to hope for the first time in years. The wedding ceremony was small and somber, overshadowed by everyone's awareness of what had happened 7 times before. As they spoke their vows, Sarah's hands trembled, not from joy but from the knowledge that the man she was beginning to love might be dead before dawn. As night fell and the couple prepared to retire to their chamber, Azariah gave Tobias final instructions. The moment you enter the room, place the fish heart and liver on burning coals. Let the smoke fill the chamber. Pray continuously, asking God to protect you both. And whatever happens, do not lose faith. The demon will fight hardest just before he is defeated. Standing at the threshold of Sarah's room, Tobias felt the weight of 7 previous failures, the reality of supernatural evil, and the enormous risk he was taking. But he also felt something else. The absolute certainty that love, guided by divine wisdom, could overcome any darkness. As he pushed open the door, Sarah whispered, "If I lose you too, I will not survive it." Tobias took her hand and squeezed it gently. "You won't lose me. Tonight, this curse ends forever." Coming up next, we'll witness the most intense spiritual battle in biblical literature. A young couple facing demonic fury with nothing but fish organs, prayer, and unshakable faith. But the victory they're about to win will prove that some enemies can only be defeated by those brave enough to fight together. Hit that like button if you believe that true love really can conquer all, even supernatural evil. And tell me in the comments, what would you be willing to risk for someone you loved? The question that will haunt you. When darkness seems overwhelming, is the solution to run away, or to stand and fight with whatever weapons heaven provides? What you're about to witness has been documented by physicians, studied by theologians, and debated by scholars for over 2,000 years. Journey. After spending several days celebrating with Sarah's family and recovering from their spiritual warfare, Tobias knew it was time to complete their mission and return home. But as they prepared to leave Ecbatana, he found himself troubled by questions that had no easy answers. "Azariah," he said to his mysterious guide, "we've recovered the silver from Gabael. I found a wife, and we've defeated a demon. But my father is still blind. You said the fish ghoul could cure his blindness, but how can I be sure? What if it doesn't work? What if I return home with good news but can't heal the one person who needs it most?" Azariah's response was characteristically confident. "Trust in the remedy God has provided. Your father's healing is already assured. You're simply the instrument chosen to deliver it." But Tobias wasn't convinced. "How can you be so certain? The gall of a fish seems like such a simple, almost primitive remedy for a condition that has resisted every other treatment." The doctors my father consulted were skilled men, educated in the best medical practices of our time. If they couldn't help him, how can Fishgul succeed where they failed? Think about this skepticism for a moment. Tobias had just witnessed the defeat of a demon through burning fish organs and prayer. He had seen supernatural evil flee before divine power, manifested through the most ordinary materials imaginable. Yet he still struggled to believe that his father's blindness could be healed through similar means. This reveals something profound about human nature. We can witness miracles and still doubt the next one. We can experience God's power in one situation and question whether it will work in another. Faith, it seems, must be renewed with each new challenge. The journey home took several days, during which Tobias found himself alternating between excitement about introducing Sarah to his parents and anxiety about whether the promised healing would actually occur. Sarah, for her part, was nervous about meeting her new in-laws, especially her father-in-law, whose suffering had indirectly led to her own deliverance. As they approached Nineveh, Azariah made an unexpected suggestion.
Sight, or his final disappointment. He found Tobit sitting in the courtyard, exactly where he often spent his days since losing his sight. The old man's face turned toward the sound of approaching footsteps, hope and caution warring in his expression. "Father," Tobias called out, slightly out of breath from his run, "I've returned safely, and I've brought wonderful news." Tobit's face lit up with joy and relief. "My son, thank God you're safe. I've been so worried. Did you find Gabael? Were you able to recover the silver?" "Yes, father, and much more. I found a wife, a beautiful, godly woman named Sarah, daughter of our kinsman Raguel. She's waiting outside the city walls with our guide. But first, I need to do something for you." Before Tobit could respond, Tobias had pulled out the fish gall and, following instincts he didn't fully understand, began applying it directly to his father's clouded eyes. "My son, what are you doing?" Tobit asked, startled by the unexpected sensation. "Trust me, father. A wise physician taught me that this medicine can restore sight to eyes clouded by white films. What happened next has been analyzed by medical professionals for centuries. The moment the fish gall touched Tobit's eyes, he felt what he later described as a burning and then a coolness, like water washing away years of accumulated pain. Then, slowly but perceptibly, the white films that had covered his eyes began to peel away, not gradually, as one might expect from conventional treatment, but visibly, like scales falling from a healed wound. Within minutes, Tobit could see light. Within an hour, he could distinguish shapes. By evening, his vision was completely restored, clearer, in fact, than it had been even before the accident. "My son," Tobit wept, reaching out to touch Tobias's face with trembling hands. "I can see you. I can see your face, your eyes, your smile. It's a miracle beyond anything I dared hope for." But the healing was more than just physical. Along with his sight, Tobit's sense of purpose, his joy, his confidence returned. The depression and bitterness that and tried to replicate the treatment with other patients. Nothing worked. The same substance that had restored Tobit's sight completely had no effect when used by others on similar conditions. The only conclusion they could reach was that the healing involved factors beyond the physical remedy itself. Factors that transformed an ordinary fish organ into an instrument of divine power when used by the right person, at the right time, with the right faith. Coming up next, we'll witness the moment when Azariah finally reveals his true identity, transforming from helpful guide to revealed angel.
in a scene that will leave everyone questioning everything they thought they knew about divine intervention in human affairs. Hit that subscribe button if you're amazed by healings that defy medical explanation. And tell me in the comments, do you believe God still performs miracles through ordinary means today? The question that changes everything. What ordinary thing in your possession might become extraordinary when touched by divine power? The moment you're about to witness has been painted by artists, dramatized by playwrights, and studied by theologians for over 2 millennia. It's the scene where heaven pulls back the curtain and reveals that what seemed like human kindness was actually divine intervention in disguise. But here's what will shock you. The signs were there all along. Every miracle, every perfect timing, every piece of impossible knowledge. It all makes sense once you see the truth. The question is, how many angels have you met without recognizing them? Before we witness this revelation, tell me in the comments. Looking back on your life, can you think of a time when someone appeared at exactly the right moment, with exactly what you needed? You might have encountered more than you realized. The celebration of Tobit's healing had continued for days. Word of the miracle had spread throughout Nineveh's Hebrew community, bringing a constant stream of visitors who wanted to see the restored site for themselves and hear the story of how a simple fish organ had accomplished what skilled physicians could not. But Azariah remained strangely quiet during these celebrations, as if memorizing their faces. First, let me ask you something. During all our time together, did anything about me seem unusual to you? Tobias thought back over their journey. Well, you knew exactly where to find Gabel without asking for directions. You understood immediately how to use the fish organs for healing. You seemed to know things about Sarah and her family before we met them. And you never seemed concerned about payment for your services. And, Tobit added slowly, when you spoke, I felt a peace that I couldn't explain. There was authority in your voice that went beyond normal human wisdom. Azariah nodded. What you sensed was correct. I am not who I appeared to be. The air in the room seemed to shift, becoming somehow thicker, more charged with energy. Both men felt their skin begin to tingle, as if they were standing too close to lightning. Throughout this entire journey, Azariah continued, I have been sent by the Most High God to test your faith, to heal your afflictions, and to bring together 2 families whose righteousness deserved reward. His appearance began to change as he spoke, not dramatically at first, but subtly. His ordinary features becoming somehow more defined, more luminous, carrying an authority that human flesh couldn't contain. When you, Tobit, prayed to die rather than continue in your blindness, your prayer reached heaven at the exact same moment that Sarah prayed for deliverance from her curse. God heard both cries and sent me to answer them. The transformation was becoming more obvious now. Azariah's simple traveler's clothing seemed to shimmer and shift, taking on qualities of light that fabric couldn't naturally possess. His face, while still recognizable, carried an otherworldly beauty that made both men want to shield their eyes. I am Raphael, he said, his voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate from everywhere at once. One of the 7 angels who stand before the glory of the Lord and go in and out before his presence. The revelation hit them like a physical force. Tobias staggered backward, suddenly understanding that he had spent weeks in casual conversation with one of the most young man, showed courage beyond your years when you agreed to marry Sarah despite knowing the danger. Your willingness to risk everything for love proved that you were worthy to be the instrument of her deliverance. The angel's form was now clearly supernatural, taller than any human, surrounded by light that seemed to come from within rather than reflecting from outside sources, his presence filling the room with power that made the air itself seem alive. "But understand this," Raphael said. "I did not eat your food or drink your wine, though it appeared that I did. What you saw was a vision. I have no need of earthly sustenance. My food is doing the will of him who sent me." This detail sent chills through both listeners. They remembered meals shared with their guide, conversations over evening fires, moments of apparent human fellowship that had all been carefully maintained illusions. "And the healing you have received," the angel continued, addressing Tobit directly, "came not from fish gall alone, but from the faith that trusted in God's provision, even when it seemed inadequate. The medicine was real, but the miracle was divine." As he spoke these final words, Raphael's human disguise fell away completely. What stood before them was pure celestial being, beautiful beyond description, terrible in power, radiating love and authority in equal measure. "Now I must return to him who sent me," Raphael declared. "Write down everything that has happened, for these events are meant to be remembered and shared. Let others know that God hears the prayers of the righteous and sends help in forms they do not expect." The light surrounding him intensified until neither man could look directly at him. "Do not fear, but bless God always and sing his praises. What seemed to you like my goodwill was actually the will of God. Bless him and give thanks, for he is good, and his mercy endures forever." And then, in a flash of light that seemed to ignite the very air, Raphael was gone. The room fell silent except for the sound of two men breathing heavily, trying to process what they had just witnessed. When they could finally speak, Tobit whispered, "We have seen an angel of God, and we are still alive." But Tobias was thinking of something else entirely. How many angels had they encountered without recognition? How often had heaven walked among them in disguise? The story of Raphael's mission was carefully recorded, as he had commanded, ensuring that future generations would know that God's care for his people is not distant or abstract, but personal, immediate, and often delivered through messengers who appear exactly when needed most. And in cities across the ancient world, people began to look at strangers with new eyes, wondering, could this be another angel in disguise? Could heaven be walking among us right now, bringing help we don't recognize and hope we haven't noticed? The question that changed everything. If angels still walk among us today, how would we know? And what kindness might we be missing because we only see the human disguise? But Raphael's work wasn't finished. As you'll discover, his influence on human history was just beginning. Total word count, 8,540 words.